Welcome back to the Great Primeval Show. I am the Arch Minister, and I am joined by Ancient Realms Hodgepodge and special guest John. Today we'll be summarising the first Primeval novel, Shadow of the Jaguar. Written by Stephen Seville and edited by Kath Tretchman at Titan Books Publishing. The blurb for Shadow of the Jaguar is as follows. A delirious backpacker crawls out of a dense Peruvian jungle, muttering about impossible things he has seen. A local ranger reports seeing extraordinary animal tracks and bones, fresh ones that he cannot explain. Cutter and the team are plunged into the hostile environment of the Peruvian rainforest, where they endure a perilous journey leading them to something more terrifying than they could possibly imagine. Now, onto the summaries of each chapter.
We're in Peru, and living out there's something terrifying.
In a rainforest in Peru, two brothers, Cam and Jamie Bairstow, are sitting around a fire during an exploration of a ruined Incan temple.
Incredible Incas!
Cam tells his brother how he saw something he can't quite explain whilst exploring. He describes it as broken glass floating in the air. This is later revealed to be an anomaly. When Cam leaves Jamie to relieve himself, the pair are ambushed by a cat-like creature with large teeth.
Pointy teeth!
In London, James Lester is summoned by Sir Charles Bairstow, the wealthy father of the two brothers who were attacked. He asks for Lester to send an expedition to Peru to save his sons under the guise of a scientific investigation. However, Lester refuses. At the Ark, Nick Cutter receives an email from his former student, Nando Estevez, who says the Peruvian animals there have been acting strangely, and more still, he found tracks and bones of creatures from the Paleo-Pleistocene age, raising the possibility of the first known overseas anomaly. Back in Peru, having somehow survived his encounter several days ago, Cam Bairstow stumbles across a funeral pyre in the forest. The bodies had sustained the same injuries as the brothers.
The plot thickens.
Cutter asks Lester to go visit Peru, but is turned down. Sir Charles then calls and reveals that Cam has been found. He uses government shenanigans to force Lester to send the team there, to rescue Cam and do their anomaly research. Cutter has mixed feelings about this.
When the team discusses the possibility of a Peruvian anomaly, Cutter delegates tasks to Abby, Connor, Stephen and Jenny to prepare for their Peruvian adventure. Whilst hospitalised in Cuzco, a masked man sneaks into Cam Bairstow's ward and attempts to poison his IV drip. However, he is interrupted by a hospital orderly. Do we care? I don't think we care. Using the phone number from Charles Bairstow, Jenny calls the man on the ground in Peru to get details on where to find Cam. The next day, 15 hours into the flight to Peru, the ARC team share some banter and we're introduced to the three Special Forces soldiers accompanying them, Jack Stark, Andy Blaine and Sean Lucas. In the rainforest, Nando's brother and some other park rangers find another town massacred and a black cat-like creature with huge fangs attacks and kills them. The team land in Cuzco, Peru and are greeted by Bairstow's man on the ground, Alexander Chaplin, who drives them to a hotel for the night. He refuses to take Jenny to see Cam in hospital and suggests they keep a low profile. The next morning, Stark notices several people spying on them, hiding in plain sight as regular citizens.
The team put on a show for the Watchers, acting as tourists, taking in all the sights so they don't cause any suspicion, but Cutter asks Connor to take photos of these Watchers. After watching some local acrobats perform, the team decide to go and get some food. When they return to the hotel, they find that their rooms have been ransacked, but nothing has been stolen.
My room.
Mine too.
Cutter can't sleep and gets up early and buys a local newspaper with an article about El Chupacabra with a doctored image of a black dog. The article claims that the locals are accusing Cam Bairstow of killing the people found dead in the rainforest, including his own brother. The team deduced that the El Chupacabra myth, born from livestock with distinct bite marks from a black cat or dog-like creature, combined with Cam's description, suggests they are dealing with a prehistoric creature. Cutter plans to contact Nando Estevez for Jenny to try and speak to Cam, and to show him pictures provided by Connor of possible candidates for the creature he saw, and for the others to act as tourists, advising Stephen to use his new wingsuit to go gliding. How does this help?
Acting as tourists, Stephen rents out the hotel receptionist's brother as his personal driver for the day, whilst Abby and Connor go on a pseudo date, looking at some landmarks around the town. Stephen eventually puts on his squirrel suit and jumps off a cliff. Cutter calls Nando, informing him that his team will be joining him at the reserve later in the day. He advises Nando and his rangers to search thoroughly for possible clues of an unknown creature or an anomaly.
Jenny and Stark accuse Chaplin of organizing the hotel room burglary, to which he vehemently protests. They drive to the hospital to take Cam to a safe house, the ambassador's summer home. Whilst doing so, Jenny spots a car park outside the hospital, and men wielding guns step outside of the vehicle. They run into their car with Cam to help him get to the safe house, with Jenny unsure if she can trust Chaplin. At the hotel, Cutter calls Jenny and forms a bait-and-switch plan. Cutter and Blaine dress in Hawaiian shirts as disguises, get into Fabrice's car, and change clothes. Escaping their followers, they arrive at the safe house. Jenny believes they were brought to Peru to cover for something else. While Cam recovers, Cutter calls Steven, telling them to go ahead to the reserve. Whilst looking through the house, Cutter finds a desk diary with a list of appointments. The name Manfred Eberhardt was circled in red and dated to a week before Nando emailed him, roughly when the brothers were attacked. Cam describes the cat-like creature that attacked him to Cutter, who believes it to be a Thylacosmilus. Cutter, Jenny, and Blaine leave for the reserve to meet with the others, with Stark staying to keep watch over Cam.
Despite strongly resembling saber-toothed cats such as Smilodon, to a point where they used it in its place on the book's cover rather lazily, Thylacosmilus was not a cat and simply convergently evolved huge saber teeth. Whilst often called a marsupial, it is technically a metatherian, a group that includes all mammals more closely related to marsupials than to placentals. It was originally classified as a borhyaenid, but has since been moved to its own family, Thylacosmilidae. It is also oversized in the story, as is typical of primeval creatures, said to be 6 foot long and around 1.5 feet wide, with very thick muscles. Thylacosmilus is described as being from the Pliocene and living for 2 million years. However, newer studies published since the book came out have shown they are actually from the Pliocene and lived from roughly 9 to 3 million years ago. Thylacosmilus is described as black or dark brown with a mottled pattern, fitting for a predator that was thought to have inhabited the more forested regions it lived in. Jenny calls Lester to fill him in on the team's situation. Lester's strangely disappointed in her and the update. That's it? That's the entire chapter? At 11 PM at night, Chaplin asserts he must help the team personally despite Cutter's protests. They then drive out of Cuzco to the reserve to meet up with the others.
At the reserve, Nando shows the team a cast he took of a footprint. All deduce that it is not a jaguar, multiple times, nor of any other creatures in the region. Chaplin reveals that the Bairstow brothers had marked the coordinates of their intended destination with the embassy, before they searched the rainforest. Nando states that these coordinates mark the Inca temple of the Dead Earth.
This is taking too long.
The team set out for the temple, having to walk 10 miles to get there on foot, with Connor using the handheld anomaly detector. Nando inquires about the team's reasons for being there, to which Cutter brushes them off. They find more tracks, deducing that there are several of the creatures. Nearby to the tracks, they find the corpse of a sloth, with its skin shredded by whatever fed upon it to eat its quote-unquote warm, wet insides.
Why? Doesn't anyone love me?
Nando informs the team that there's a tribal settlement nearby. The team encounters unnatural silence, the mysterious creature's calling card.
No bird song.
The team then hears roars and screams very close by. The Thylacosmilus slaughter the tribespeople of the nearby village in a matter of minutes. Whilst investigating the village, Cutter notices how the tracks appear to show the creatures were strategically taking down each person, and how none of the corpses had been fed upon, speculating that it's a warning to other animals.
It didn't eat him. It's killing for sport.
He also smells a strong, distinct scent of burnt cookie dough. The team follow a blood trail of one of the creatures into the forest. Back at the safe house, 5 mercenaries breach the perimeter looking to kill Cam, but Stark has prepped contingencies.
Don't worry, we've got contingency plans.
Grenade tripwires, explosives, a collapsed ceiling, 2 gunshots, a headbutt and a broken throat later, Stark has disposed of the 4 men. Stark realises that the supposed Safehouse was in fact set up by Chaplin to take out Cam, and the ARC team is in danger. Having killed all but one of the assassins, Stark asks the last survivor who sent them before disposing of him.
I said who sent you?
After Cutter and the others had left to follow the trail, it is revealed to the reader that Alex Chaplin was bribed by smuggler Manfred Eberhardt after Cam was attacked? What? This was done to create a story for the media that would put off tourists from exploring the region. Whilst busy feeling sorry for himself, he's attacked by another creature. As he dies, he smells burnt biscuits and vanilla. The last thing he sees is another creature towering over him, the Incan god Pachacamac. Cutter finds a fresh Thylacosmilus corpse nearly torn in half with strange punctures all over it, and a broken tooth. Cutter speculates that this was done by another deadlier predator, and not the tribesmen. They hear Alex Chaplin being killed, but by the time they get back to the village, he is already dead. The team buries him and leaves. Womp womp. Cutter notes how there is so much senseless death.
So much death. What can men do against such reckless hate?
As night falls, the team moves through the trees in a single file line, hand on shoulder to get back to the vehicles. From the darkness, the growls of unseen Thylacosmilus attempt to shepherd them away from their route. The team creates some makeshift fire torches to keep the creatures at bay. Cutter then smells coffee.
I prefer tea.
Suddenly, one of the Thylacosmilus attacks and severely injures Blaine, who saves Abby before the team drives the creatures away with fire and guns. Whilst Abby tends to Blaine's wounds, Cutter and Stevens smell apples and theorize that another creature is using pheromones to control the Thylacosmilus, similar to queen bees and may be from the future. Cutter then smells roe, another mysterious pheromone. Lucas and Gennaro leave and return with the Land Rovers to rescue the others. After narrowly escaping 5 attacking Thylacosmilus in the cars, Cutter glimpses another creature lurking in the tree line before they drive off.
What the hell is that?
After escaping to the main road, Jenny has thoughts about Claudia Brown. Suddenly, a shadowy figure throws traffic spikes into the road, popping their car's tyres, causing it to crash. An unknown party then kidnaps Jenny and knocks Cutter unconscious. Stark drives out to warn the others about Chaplin. He speculates that the poachers wanted the Thylacosmilus because they are so rare and valuable, and would stop anyone who got in their way, including Cam. He radios Cutter to fill him in, who in turn informs Stark that they've taken Jenny. He heads to the compound, determined to get her back no matter what.
Using the secret entrance of an abandoned Incan temple, Stark takes out the guards and infiltrates the compound to rescue Jenny. Blaine dies from his injuries, despite Abby's best efforts to keep him alive. They radio Cutter, who tells them what happened, and they form a plan to try and return the creatures through the anomaly. They set out towards the temple with tranq guns, flare guns, strips of rubber, gasoline and lighters.
As is foreshadowed earlier, Stark rescues Jenny as her knight in shining armor from the poachers. Despite Jenny suggesting he take out the poachers completely, Stark refuses and proceeds with the original plan of getting her and Cam safely back to England. The team cross the bridge. That's kind of it. I guess I could go into a little more detail. On their way back to the temple, the team has to cross a chasm on an old rickety rope bridge. Cutter nearly falls. Oh no!
As the team enters the temple, they smell thyme and rosemary, more of the creature's pheromones. The detector picks up an anomaly, and the team lights up their rubber to form a cloud to interfere with the pheromones. Down in the temple's antechamber, they find a fading anomaly and 5 Thylacosmilus lying in wait, ready to attack when the command is given. Pachacamac then reveals itself to be a large bird and sets its pack of pouch blades on the team. Lucas is killed by the future bird's long tooth-covered tongue as the team struggle to fend off the Thylacosmilus. The burning rubber plan doesn't work, so Cutter decides to shoot a flare at Lucas's corpse as the bird feeds on it, igniting the petrol he had on him and burning his body, releasing plentiful isoprenoid fumes. This has the intended effect of relinquishing the bird's control over the pouch blades, causing panic as all the creatures flee through the anomaly and are never seen again.
Well, this party died.
The birds. They are the top predators in this weird forest.
This thing, referred to as Pachacamac by most of the characters, is a species of bird likely from some time in the future, making it the only future creature in the novels. The name Pachacamac is in reference to the Incan deity of the same name, albeit spelt differently. The bird is said to look like its namesake, despite the Pachacamac deity being said to be invisible and having limited art depictions, although certain idols depict Pachacamac as a human. The future bird is the main antagonist creature, if you can call it that. However, it only appears via vague sightings by characters in earlier chapters, and properly in only 2.5 pages in the penultimate chapter, and even then, it's only given a very brief and abstract description, which makes it hard to decipher what it actually looks like. Despite the fleeting appearance, it still leaves an impact and is easily one of the more spooky and mysterious creatures from the franchise. Words used to describe its appearance taken directly from the book include awkward, ungainly, a hybrid of avian, lupine and shadows, hookbeak, and said to have an oleaginous proboscis-like tongue with millions of tiny teeth on it. From this, we can deduce that it isn't the most agile or fast creature in the world, and so isn't built for speed, unlike something of similar size like an ostrich or emu. This may be one of the reasons why it surrounds itself with a faster moving animal as a defense. It is likely flightless, as its wings are never mentioned, nor are many other details to be fair, such as a tail or even what colour it is, but this makes it seem that it can't fly, as it seems to walk everywhere. It is likely that it's as tall, if not a bit taller than a human in overall height, but this is also unconfirmed. Throughout the book, it's also referred to as a he, suggesting that this individual is a male. Because it's referred to multiple times as hookbeak, we can assume that its beak is raptorial in appearance, like a bird of prey, which would make sense for a predatory bird species. It was known to eat human, sloth, and Thylacosmilus meat. The long tongue with teeth on it is very similar to the future shark's organ from Series 2, Episode 4.
It's a tongue covered in teeth.
Woodpeckers also have toothed tongues. Species like the Andean flicker, a South American woodpecker, also feed on the ground, so could be a potential ancestor of it. Alternatively, it could have also evolved from cuckoos as a parasitic host type animal which uses other species to do its bidding. Elaborating on that, the most interesting characteristic of this creature is its ability to control other animals. Cutter compares its control to that of a queen bee. Whenever it gives a command, various pheromones are released. To humans, the bird's pheromones were said to have strong smells like burnt cookie dough, vanilla, coffee, apples, roe, aka the seaside, sulfur and ammonia, and spices like rosemary and thyme. All of these smells must presumably only be a byproduct of the pheromones, and even though we never find out which smells relate to what command, all must surely have their own instructions which the Thylacosmilus blindly follow. Dunces. Marsupial intelligence is, on average, lower than that of placental mammals, and so this may explain their susceptibility to the mind-controlling pheromones. Lucky that the bird came across them instead of other species. Cutter also speculates that it could possibly control humans, but no one seems susceptible to the pheromones, but this is a terrifying idea. Cutter's idea to disrupt the pheromones by burning rubber and later human flesh seems to work against the bird's abilities, as the new smells of charred human remains fill the area and engulf the bird's pheromones. Maybe this wouldn't have worked in a more open environment, but fortunately in the temple it's concentrated and amplified. Its plan is unknown, but it does seem to have some varying levels of intelligence, if it is able to command quote-unquote weaker-minded creatures and coordinate attacks. It could have been doing this out of desperation since there's only one of them. After losing its control over the Thylacosmilus, the future bird seemingly panics and flees back through the anomaly in the temple ruins where it likely first came from, never to be seen again as the anomaly closes immediately after. What became of it, we never know, as it is never mentioned again, apart from a name drop on Nick Cutter's anomaly matrix in Series 3, Episode 2 and 3. Since this bird has never been fully realised, many fans have taken it upon themselves to create their own version of how this creature may look. Ancient Realms designed a creature which resembles what we consider to be a feasible appearance for the future bird, and is what we have featured in this video. The future bird remains one of the most enigmatic and underexplored creatures within Primeval.
Sometime later, the team are back in England, and Cutter briefly fills Lester in on what happened in Peru. Naturally, Lester is most displeased by the political implications of their mission, and that they allowed a future creature to go back through an anomaly into the past. Cutter meanwhile speculates that the future bird may have fled into ancient Peru, and become worshipped as the god Pachacamac by the Incas. And that's the end. That's the end of the book.
One thing to note about this novel is that every single bit of information about the characters, environment, or events is described in a lot of detail. So much so that the author will regularly stop the story to spend several paragraphs, sometimes whole pages, describing what a tree looks like, or delve into the characters' random thoughts. There is also a lot of references to pop cultures, and I do mean a lot, especially music. Now, onto the breakdowns of each chapter.
There are several apparent errors or continuity inconsistencies in this novel. The email from Nando is dated to the 17th of May 2008. Most likely this was the intended release date for the book. However, it was pushed back to the 13th of May. In universe, though, this book is either set in late 2006 or early 2007. Cutter's office is apparently in the loading bay, or the operations room is called the loading bay for some reason. I don't know, maybe another draft would have been necessary. The character of Oliver Leake is completely absent from this novel for unknown reasons, and apparently Jenny is now Lester's assistant.
Alice in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass, and Aladdin are referenced. This marks the first of many references to other things in this book. This dialogue from Abby seems like it was meant for Cutter or Connor. Connor brings up mythical creatures of South American folklore, such as El Chupacabra and Quetzalcoatl. This could be in reference to Cutter's speculation in Series 1, Episode 3, and Series 3 in general.
If anomalies have appeared in the past, and they have, if Pristichamsis is sunning itself on the banks of the Nile 3,000 years ago, that's the stuff of legend.
We see Connor access the Ark's personal files, specifically Abby's, where he discovers her middle name is Sarah. Keep this in mind for Series 2, Episode 6.
Keep out my personal information, Connor.
There is an error here where the book states that Cambersto is talking, when it is actually Lester speaking with Charles over the phone. Whilst making his MP3 player's song playlist for the flight, Connor mentions several music artists. Augustana, Amy Mann, Breaking Benjamin, Everclear, Snow Patrol, which actually has a song featured in the original broadcast version of Series 1, Episode 1, Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, Neil Hannon, and Mike Doughty. Some specific songs are also named. These are Next Year by the Foo Fighters, England My Home by the Levellers, Black by Pearl Jam, Must Be Love by Madness, Prince Charming by Adam Ant, Ghost Town by The Special, A Kind of Magic by Queen, Mirror in the Bathroom by The Beat, Black Dog by Led Zeppelin, 2112 by Rush, and Ashes to Ashes by David Bowie. John has made a playlist of Connor's songs on Spotify if you're interested, link in the description. A rerun of the show Robot Wars is showing on the TV in the Ark Rec Room for some reason, probably Connor's choice. Interestingly, when the team discusses what possible creatures they may be dealing with, they only mention extinct South American animals. I wonder if the author Stephen Saville was under the impression that anomalies could only link to the same place geographically. This is incorrect, of course. Lester calls Cutter Indiana Cutter, referencing Indiana Jones. Abby references Flash Gordon. Stephen also reads a magazine about hang gliding. Keep that in mind for later. Cutter apparently can't look Jenny in the eyes. Cutter inquires about poachers several times, one of his hunches which foreshadows the real antagonists of the story. Chaplin specifically mentions the Shining Path group of real-life terrorists. Cutter quotes The Wizard of Oz when he says, "We're not in Kansas anymore, Toto," which sounds like it would be amazing in a Scottish accent. Upon spotting a llama, Connor mentions Jeff Minter, the founder of the software company Llamasoft. and apparently he's great at trivial pursuits?
The book states that llamas are a common food in Peru, going as far as to say that most dishes that claim to be beef or pork are actually llama. The consumption of llama is actually quite uncommon, as they are seen as valuable assets to have, not food. James Bond, Spy vs. Spy, James Blunt, and George Romero's Of the Dead films are referenced. Cutter also goes on a rant about how westernized the world has become, for some reason. Cutter refers to Pavarotti as a dead Italian. This creates one of the most morbid inconsistencies in the canon. As far as we know, this book is set in late 2006 or early 2007. However, Pavarotti didn't pass away until the 6th of September 2007. Cutter dreams about Claudia, stressing how at least when Helen went missing, he could at least talk to people about it. Jenny mentions the poaching industry, more foreshadowing. Dracula, the Beast of Bodmin, and the Baskerville Hound are mentioned. Also, the Egyptian god Anubis is compared to a big cat, as possible explanation of its appearance in history. This is somewhat similar to the Pristichampsus Amot comparison in Series 3, Episode 1. Adding to the notion of anomalies only linking through time in this book alone, the boar hyenids are mentioned, a family of predatory marsupial relatives that lived in South America during the Miocene epoch.
Apparently Stephen's wingsuit was a gift from Andy Mangles. How or why Stephen is friends with an American comic writer is never revealed. MTV, James Dean, The Batmobile, Superman, Ry Cooder, Howlin' Wolf, Duran Duran's Save a Prayer, Simon and Garfunkel's Mrs. Robinson, Madonna's Like a Prayer, and Wile E. Coyote are mentioned. Either the Mysterious Cities of Gold cartoon or the Road to El Dorado film is referenced. The receptionist's brother and Connor both mention that Cuzco is in the shape of a puma. Both Abby and Stephen failed to see it, but apparently it's an actual thing. A continuity issue occurs in this chapter. Connor does some major flirting to impress Abby, and she somewhat reciprocates. However, during the time between Series 2, Episode 3 and 4, Connor is supposed to be dating Caroline, and tensions between himself and Abby were supposed to be high.
Do you know what? You don't know what you're talking about. Why don't you stay out of it?
Connor?
No, I don't care what you think, alright?
Stephen has a very nice moment of reflection on his relationship with Nick Cutter, though he seems under the impression because Helen lived in the Permian period for a while that she was hundreds of million years old. The non-existent word Metazoic is erroneously used instead of Mesozoic.
Tricycloplots.
Cutter spends a whole page ranting on his thoughts of the globalization of language, for some reason.
Captain Birdseye is referenced. Twice.
Old Captain Fishface knows how to treat his crew. Just feed them up with plenty of nourishing cod pieces. It keeps them happy and healthy, for the time being.
M.R. James, Penny Dreadful, Charles Dickens, Das Spangil, Pepe's, David Niven, and James Bond are mentioned. At one point, Cutter tunes the radio to 87.6 FM to try to find anomaly radio interference. Stephen mentioning Permian-era reptiles is a reference to Series 1, Episode 1.
Indiana Jones is referenced again. Lester apparently knows what a Thylacosmilus is from being around the team. Seems oddly specific, but okay. The Nutty Professor is also referenced. Cutter tries checking radio frequency 87.6 FM again. This time he hears anomaly interference. Creedence Clearwater Revival, Bruce Springsteen's The River, and Buena Vista Social Club are mentioned. For some reason, Cam recalls a story about dead animals floating down a river. This has no relevance to the current story at all. Abby is described as wayfish, which means thin and looking unhealthy or uncared for, which doesn't describe her character at all.
The team appear to recognise the cast of a Thylacosmilus footprint. However, no trackways attributed to this animal are known, so I don't know how that's possible. Abby also states that the footprint cast is not from a coyote or a bobcat, neither of which are found in South America anyway. It is said that Cutter taught a 19-year-old Nando over 10 years ago, so that was 2 years before Helen Cutter disappeared. Edgar Rice Burroughs is mentioned. Just like in Series 2 Episode 1, Cutter says,
"I could kiss you, Connor."
However, instead of to Connor, he says it to Chaplin for some reason, a guy he's been actively hating for several chapters. Cutter says, "Rise and shine, my lovelies," which I can't imagine him ever saying. The show Lost, Luke Skywalker from Star Wars, and Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors are all mentioned. Cutter and Stephen were described as growing beards since they arrived in Peru. What an image. Stephen apparently can't talk to Cutter, Connor or Abby about his Helen problems. Yet the reverse apparently isn't true when we later see Connor asking Stephen for relationship advice. A fabled city of gold is referenced.
It's a mythical lost city in the Amazon. Conquistadors called it El Dorado. Supposedly the Uga tribe were chosen by the gods 7,000 years ago to build a giant city out of solid gold.
Connor mentions prostitutes for some reason in this supposedly family-friendly franchise. Somehow deforestation of the Amazon is equated to the Big Yellow M. The characters also debate the Amazon rainforest for a good 3 pages, for no apparent reason.
Connor thinks about if there's a way to control anomalies, such as to cause them to open or stay closed, both of which we see at later points in the novel Fire and Water and Series 3 Episode 9 and 10. It's never stated whether the silence is caused by the creature itself making the other forest animals be quiet, or whether they willingly became silent when they detected a threat. Captain Ryan and Tom's deaths are thought about by Cutter. What's also weird is that some of the villagers are left alive, for some reason. Die Hard is referenced. Francisco Pizarro is mentioned. Stark deduces that the mercenaries were likely sent by poachers, somehow.
Why he stays behind here and doesn't go with the others is unclear. F. Scott Fitzgerald is mentioned. It is never revealed why the future bird killed the Thylacosmilus, considering it was supposed to have them under its mind control at this point. The Thylacosmilus having a half-broken tooth may be a reference to Half-Tooth, the Smilodon from Walking with Beasts. Cutter accidentally calls Jenny Claudia Brown, as he repeatedly did during Season 2.
Don't call me Claudia!
The ravenous bug-blatter beast of Traal from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is mentioned. This scene actually feels like it's straight out of an episode, with really tense and disturbing moments. It's pretty good, considering this book's other scenes.
The film Rain Man is referenced. Jenny thinks about primordial worms, saber-toothed cats, and velociraptors as creatures the team has encountered in reference to the first 3 episodes of Series 2. 2 interesting notes about this is that it claims the primeval raptors are specifically velociraptors, and secondly, Jenny never encountered the raptors, so how she knows about them is up for speculation. Jenny seemingly knows about Cutter's photo of Claudia Brown in his wallet. Again, it's unknown how she knows about this, considering she doesn't actually see it until Series 3 Episode 5. Jenny also thinks about her fiancé Mike. The Shining Path is mentioned again. The coordinates are given to where the poacher's compound is located in Peru, however this location is just rainforest. Stark nearly decides to drive one of the Ambassador's Lotus cars. The Maitland family have a soft spot for Lotuses.
Dick Tracy and Rambo are mentioned. Sweeney Todd and James Bond are also referenced. This Inca temple doesn't appear to be the same one seen later in the story. The Wizard of Oz is referenced again. When Lucas makes a date rape joke about the tranquilizers, Connor says, "Welcome to my world," for some reason. The implications of this is concerning.
We should huddle together for warmth.
Jenny's reaction to say, "kill all the poachers," is reminiscent of her saying Stephen should have shot Mr. West in Series 2, Episode 3.
Shot him though, my best coat.
Connor references a line from the story, The Three Billy Goats Gruff. Dante's Inferno is referenced.
Garden of Evil is referenced. Bugs being everywhere in a dark temple is very reminiscent of Temple of Doom. Also, snakes being there is similar to Raiders of the Lost Ark. The temple is called the Temple of Supe, which is named after another Inca god of the same name, oddly not Pachacamac. Connor asking for a gun is part of the running Series 2 gag of Connor not being allowed to have a gun. Cutter using the flare gun to scare off the future bird is very reminiscent of the scene in Jurassic Park 3, where Alan Grant uses one to ignite petrol to scare off the Spinosaurus.
Cutter stressing the implications of the first overseas anomaly, and that their equipment is not yet designed to detect them yet, is followed up on in the next novel, The Lost Island, and the following novels. Lester also appears strangely nasty towards Cutter in this chapter. Throughout this brief chapter, it's stated that this whole experience has had a profound impact on the team and changed them, and yet this story is never brought up ever again. And that's it. That's all there is to this book. It finishes as abruptly as that, with little to no explanation or context. We love great storytelling.
In closing, Shadow of the Jaguar takes place over roughly 2 weeks, and there's a short amount of time between this and the second Primeval novel, The Lost Island. Now that we've finished the first official Primeval novel, what do we all think?
What did I think about Shadow of the Jaguar?
Burn it! It's gone. It's done.
I will praise it for being the first bit of media to add to Primeval canon besides the series, and the ideas and concepts are interesting, with a wholly new creature and exotic setting. Some of the scenes genuinely feel scary or tense, particularly when Cutter first glimpses the bird, or the temple chapter. The future bird itself is a great idea, and it was fun to come up with a new design for it. Unfortunately, there isn't enough of the action or tense moments like this, and the book falls short in just not being that well structured. There are also a lot of inconsistencies, and the pacing is too slow for me. It feels very un-Primeval, if that's a way to describe it. I'd give it a 3 out of 10.
Shadow of the Jaguar has some really cool ideas, executed very poorly. The pacing of this book feels incredibly off, with the majority of the action happening in only the last few pages and final chapters. The first 2/3 are exhausting and cringe-inducing to read much of the time. There's not enough fleshing out with the future bird either, an otherwise fascinating concept for a primeval creature. There are 2 scenes I think are genuinely really good. The scene when the team are being stalked through the forest in the dead of night surrounded by the growls of Thylacosmilus. A wonderfully tense sequence I wish was saved for a better story. The other is Cutter dreaming about Claudia, and being unable to talk to his friends about her is a really interesting insight into his mind. It's truly a shame these little gems are hidden in just a vast ocean of pointless inner monologuing.
You sly dog! You got me monologuing! I can't believe.
I have both positive and negative things to say about the story. Let's start with the negatives. I felt that the story was quite back-heavy. A lot of the action took place in the latter half of the novel, and I feel like it suffered for that. It also could have used more world building and less of them messing around in Peru for the first half. I feel like local legends also should have been more developed. El Chupacabra was briefly mentioned, but wasn't built on enough. I also did have an issue with a lot of the fluff scenes. The biggest and most egregious example is Stephen hang gliding. I felt like that entire chapter could have not been in the book. With the negatives out of the way, there's a lot that I enjoyed about this novel. I really liked getting into the characters' heads, especially Jenny. For once we get her ruminating on Claudia Brown. She's kind of afraid of being erased from the timeline, should it be fixed. I haven't seen this angle tackled in any of the other novels, and I'm glad that we're able to have it here. I also think the author does tension real well. Even in some of the non-creature scenes, like the hospital scene was quite intense. I was glued to the book the entire time. As a horror fan, I obviously liked the horror elements the most. The scene where the team hears the villagers' screams coming out of the valley while they're trying to get to them was fantastic and just grim, and I loved it. It really showed the stakes, even though you knew none of them were going to die. I also really liked the concept of the future bird. I wish it was built on more, but an animal that's able to get into the heads of other animals and potentially humans is quite terrifying, and I am all here for it. Overall, what I liked about this novel, I really liked. I personally give this book a 7 out of 10. In my opinion, it's probably the weakest out of all the Primeval novels, but it's still a good read, and it's still fun. I highly recommend reading this book.
If I had one word to describe Shadow of the Jaguar, it would be frustrating. I can see a great story here, but it's not a great story. We get pages and pages describing the scenery, but then the action scenes are only a few sentences long. I like hearing some of the characters' thoughts, but then it's countered with paragraphs of characters' irrelevant internal monologuing. Overall, the poor writing, the lack of creatures, and the mischaracterization of our main characters makes reading this book a frustrating read. Whew! That's out of the way. The next book shouldn't be so hard. Thank you, John, for joining us for this summary. Join us next time for our summary/review of the much better book, The Lost Island.
He sticks out his tongue, do the Pachacamac, so you'd better run, do the Pachacamac. If you're down in Peru, do the Pachacamac. Watch out for you-know-who. Pachacamac.
I did it!